Chiefs Kingdom, what is up? Gary McKenzie, your host here for Gridiron Lines. And I'm excited to bring you some interesting content today. I wanted to go back and do a bit of a history lesson and look at why other teams that had an opportunity to three-peat in the NFL, why didn't they get the deal done? Why has no NFL team ever gotten a three-peat? And then I'm going to run some aggregates and see what of these problems other teams have ran into if the Chiefs could potentially run into that problem. And some of them they can, some of them they can't. But this is Gary McKenzie, once again, Gridiron Lines here at RGR Football. Really good Chiefs YouTube content channel. And I want to give a shout out to Jake. I ran into you when my son was getting his haircut today. Thanks for saying hi and doing a little fist bump with me. It's always good to run into people that watch the show. That was pretty cool. Anyways, I hope you all enjoy this video today because we're going to do a little bit of history, and I love talking history, especially NFL history. And we're going to see how this history might impact the Chiefs in the 2024 season to see if maybe some of these things might happen again to them and derail their efforts or their attempt to win their third straight Super Bowl, to be the only team in NFL history that has ever done this. So, in the history of the NFL, 8 teams have won back-to-back Super Bowls. Of those 8 teams, like we mentioned, not a single one has won a third. Only one franchise in the NFL has won back-to-back Super Bowls more than once. And this is where we play the trivia. I'm going to give you a few seconds to think to yourself, what NFL team is the only franchise to win back-to-back Super Bowls more than once? It's only one team. You're thinking. Okay. The answer to that question is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So while I was doing this research, I thought, no way. The Patriots had to have won back-to-back Super Bowls. I mean, they won all those with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, but no. They only won back-to-back Super Bowls once, not twice. So they only did it one time, 2003, 2004. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are the only team in NFL history to win back-to-back Super Bowls more than once. So there's a little bit of information for you there. But moving on to the first team, the first franchise to ever win back-to-back Super Bowls, it was the Green Bay Packers. They won Super Bowl I and II, and they went into the 1968 season. So Super Bowl I was 1966, Super Bowl II was 1967. They go into 1968, and the reason they didn't three-peat was because Vince Lombardi retired, and he became a GM. He was still affiliated with the team, but was no longer doing the head coaching duties. And then Bart Starr and other key players were aging, so they just couldn't get that third Super Bowl. And then you fast forward to the Miami Dolphins. So the awesome Dolphins in 1972, 1973, they won Super Bowl VII and Super Bowl VIII. And then they head into the 1974 season, and they finished the regular season with a good record. They had an 11-3 record, made the playoffs, but they lost to the Oakland Raiders, and that was the John Madden team. And they lost to the Oakland Raiders in dramatic fashion in the Sea of Hands game. So they lost kind of on a freak play a little bit. Who knows if they beat the Raiders in that game, in the AFC Championship game, or the AFC Divisional Playoff game. Maybe they go on and go back and win and have a chance to win their third Super Bowl, but they kind of lost to this upstart, scrappy Raiders team on a fluke play of sorts, the Sea of Hands play, and that ended their chance to three-peat. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1974 and 1975, they won Super Bowl IX and Super Bowl X, and they started the 1975 season going for the three-peat really terribly. They started with a 1-4 record, a slow start, and then they rattled off 9 consecutive wins. They eventually would lose in the AFC Championship game once again to the Raiders, and what happened? I mean, the Steelers at that point in time still had Terry Bradshaw in his prime. Much of the Steel Curtain, all those defensive players were still playing at a high level. They were still in their prime. So why didn't the Steelers win their third Super Bowl in a row? And this is because I believe they kind of hit a buzzsaw of sorts. John Madden, one of the most winningest head coaches of all time, and that team was led by Ken Stabler. They had Fred Biletnikoff, Dave Casper, Art Shell at left tackle. And, that was an offensive unit just full of awesome players for the Raiders. And they had a lot of good players on defense too. And then in addition to that, in that AFC Championship game, the Steelers were without their two running backs, Franco Harris and Ricky Blair, and that really kind of spelled the end for them. So injuries compiled with, they kind of ran into an epic John Madden team, and they were booted in the AFC Championship game, so they didn't get a chance to go to the Super Bowl and try to get a three-peat. But then they were right back in it again in 1978 and 1979. They won the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 13 and 14, respectively. And going into the 1980 season, after they won those two Super Bowls, a lot of their players were aging. They were still productive, but they weren't in their prime anymore. So players like Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, Joe Green, Jack Lambert, etc., all those players that kind of made that Steelers dynasty what it was and made that Steelers team so dominant for so long, they were just getting older, and they were out of their prime. And the Steelers' defense also saw a decline in their production and their dominance, their performance. The Steel Curtain just wasn't what it used to be. And the Steelers ended up losing that year, not making it to the Super Bowl that year, not winning the Super Bowl, and seeing their exit because of really old age of sorts. They were so good for so long, and their players got older, and they kind of fell off that way. Moving on, there was quite a bit of time, 10 years before the next time a team would win back-to-back Super Bowls, and that was the 1988 and 1989 San Francisco 49ers. They won Super Bowl 23 and Super Bowl 24. Then they went into the 1990 season, and a lot of folks had the 49ers as the clear favorite, Bill Walsh, Joe Montana, no one's going to stop these two. It was really very similar to, I think, what Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid are doing. And the 49ers get to the NFC Championship game in that 1990 season. And they're playing the New York Giants. And Leonard Marshall, defensive tackle for the New York Giants, hit Joe Montana and broke his hand. So Joe Montana broke his hand in that game. I can't remember if he was throwing the ball and he hit Leonard Marshall in the helmet, or if Leonard Marshall fell on him funny. I can't remember what happened there. If you know, down in the comments, tell me. If you lived it, if you lived that history, if you saw the game, let us know, because that's one of my favorite things about doing this channel is the folks that come in and say, hey, I was watching that game. This is exactly what happened to Joe Montana's hand. So let me know down in the comments. And while we're having this conversation, hit the like button if you like what you see here. We really appreciate everyone's feedback, everyone's comments, everyone liking the videos. And then we really, really, really appreciate everyone that subscribes to the channel. I know Ryan, Dan, myself, and Seth all work so hard to bring you content, especially Ryan and Dan. Those guys work their butts off. So any subscriber they can get helps out. And we're really trying to get to 30,000 subscribers. So just want to say thank you to everyone who hits the subscribe button and watches our content. You make this possible for me. I can't thank you enough. But back to the 49ers 1990 season. Joe Montana breaks his hand in that NFC Championship game, and that kind of spelled the end for the 49ers. They would go on to lose to the Giants in that playoff game, a really defensive playoff game. The final score is 15-13, and I believe that if Joe Montana didn't get hurt in that game, the 49ers very well could have been the one team to three-peat. But moving on, the Dallas Cowboys had a chance to three-peat in the 1994 season. They They won the Super Bowl in 1992 and 1993. That's Super Bowl 27 and Super Bowl 28 for those of you who are counting. And the 1994 season came around, going for a three-peat, and this is where things got really weird for the Dallas Cowboys franchise. And I believe that this is a problem that has plagued them to this day, and that problem is Jerry Jones. So if you have good friends who are Cowboys fans, just listen to them talk about Jerry Jones, and the majority of them are not very favorable or very fond of him, especially if they're younger. They kind of want to see Jerry Jones sell the team or move on or do something. But these problems that the Cowboys faced in 1993 were between head coach Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones. So Jimmy Johnson thought that Jerry Jones wanted too much of the limelight. He was making too many decisions or trying to make too many decisions in terms of how the team would play, scheme, what personnel, what players were on the roster. And this feud between Johnson and Jerry Jones became so heated that it leaked out into the public eye. And then once the public knew about it, the whole thing exploded. And it was a very public disagreement between these two strong personalities. And really, Jimmy Johnson loved coaching the Cowboys. He just wanted to coach the Cowboys, have the say, do what he felt was right without a bunch of interference from the owner, and Jerry Jones just couldn't do that. So because of these disputes, Jimmy Johnson said, I've had enough. I'm not going to coach the Cowboys anymore, and he left. He parted ways with the Cowboys. Both Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson agreed to part ways, and that led to the 1994 Cowboys going into the season without a head coach that had just won 2 Super Bowls in a row. Could you imagine something like this happening in today's NFL? This would never happen. Pretty much, if a head coach wins 1 Super Bowl, they get a grace period of like 3 years. Doesn't matter how bad they are. They just get some time to try to prove themselves again. But even if the Cowboys had kept Jimmy Johnson, I'm not so sure that they would have just had a cakewalk to win their three-peat, because this was the year where the 49ers came up with Steve Young, and Steve Young was in like prime Godzilla mode and was just doing things that were unseen at the time in the NFL at the quarterback position, both with his legs and his arm. Awesome passer rating, could run the ball. That was just a really darn good 49ers team in 1994. And so the Cowboys, I'm not even sure, even if Jimmy Johnson would have stuck around, that the 49ers wouldn't have beat them in the playoffs. But part of the problem for them was just that feud between Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. Moving on to the Denver Broncos, so they won the Super Bowl in 97, 98, Super Bowl 32 and 33. This one is an easy story to tell. John Elway retired. So he won back-to-back Super Bowls after several failed attempts early in his career. He finally got back to the Super Bowl and then won a couple, retired. So he rode off into the sunset. As much as I don't like John Elway or the Broncos, he won a couple and got out. And back in the day, you know, I was a huge Chiefs fan my whole life, and my dad would always say, right quarterback, wrong team. So that's how I felt about John Elway. And now that the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, we've got the right quarterback and the right team. So I'm not disappointed in the way things are going right now at all. Lastly, we have the 2003 and 2004 New England Patriots. They won Super Bowl 38 and Super Bowl 39. And the Patriots, going into the 2005 season, obviously a lot of people had them as favorites, but a bunch of strange things happened to the Patriots in 2005. They weren't like these other teams where the head coach left or a player got older or a quarterback retired, or they ran into a buzzsaw of another team that was just like another elite legendary team. They kind of had like death by 1,000 paper cuts in 2005. So they were plagued by injuries throughout the season. Deion Branch was hurt for some time. Richard Seymour was hurt. Rodney Harrison was hurt. And then because of all these injuries, they headed into the postseason with a 10-6 record, I believe, as a wild card team. The offense also struggled all year long because they couldn't run the ball. They didn't have a very good running back on the roster at the time. And then the offensive line was having major issues all throughout the season. Tom Brady was getting hit a lot. And because of all these problems, they eventually lost to Jake Plummer and the Denver Broncos at Mile High Stadium in a road playoff game. And in that game, to add insult to injury, or add more paper cuts to this death by 1,000 paper cuts, Tom Brady threw 2 interceptions in that playoff game, and they also lost a fumble. So it was really just a bad year. They just had a bad year for the Patriots in 2005. That led to their demise. And, you know, sometimes that just happens. This is the NFL. It's hard to win a bunch of games for a prolonged period of time. And that's what makes what Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are doing so dang impressive. But looking at the aggregates, we have these 8 teams that had the opportunity to three-peat. What kind of information can we glean from what happened to these different teams? So 2 times the team lost their head coach, and that was part of their demise. So we have 8 teams, but we have more than 8 reasons, because sometimes 2 reasons could have been why that team didn't end up going for the three-peat. But twice that team lost their head coach, and that kind of put a damper on things. The Chiefs, they're not subjected to that. Andy Reid signed an extension. For all appearances, he's going to be coaching in Kansas City for quite a long while still. So the Chiefs don't have to worry about falling on that sword. They're not going to lose their head coach. Another 2 times why teams weren't able to three-peat, key players just were no longer in their prime, and they couldn't perform at the rate that they used to. So this one for the Chiefs maybe is a little iffy. So you've got Chris Jones on the wrong side of 30, Travis Kelce on the wrong side of 35. So I am of the opinion that Kelce can continue to play at a high level for a couple more years. And the reason I say this is because his play is so cerebral. It's not necessarily, hey, I'm going to beat you in a 40-yard dash and get to my spot quicker, and that's how I'm going to win. That's not his game. His game is, I'm going to find the spot, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm going to know where Mahomes wants to throw the ball, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's Kelce's game. And I think he has a little bit of Jerry Rice in him like that, in that Jerry Rice knew how to use his body. He knew how to get into space, and he knew how to use all these other intangibles to his advantage to get open and catch the ball. That's Travis Kelce. And that's why I think he can play in the NFL for much longer than your typical receiver or tight end. So I think Jerry Rice had like a 1,000-yard season when he was 40 years old or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if Kelce was playing for quite a while longer. So as far as, players on the Chiefs team kind of leaving their prime, I don't know about that. Patrick Mahomes definitely isn't leaving his prime. Chris Jones, while he's on the wrong side of 30, he still looks pretty darn good to me. And there's been a lot of dominant defensive tackles that played well into their mid-30s and were still productive. So I'm not certain that would be a nail in the coffin for the Chiefs in terms of players leaving their prime. One time, a team had their three-peat broken up because they lost to a legendary play. So that sea of hands play, that's one of those things where any given Sunday kind of thing. And the Chiefs, I think, are subject to that. Every NFL team is subject to in any given Sunday moment. So that's one thing I think could potentially happen to the Chiefs to derail their three-peat. Moving on, 3 times key players were injured. I think the Chiefs could be subjected to this too. Injuries happen in the NFL. We just saw in the Chiefs' first Super Bowl in their recent back-to-back series of championships here, Patrick Mahomes almost didn't finish the playoffs. He hurt his ankle, high ankle sprain, miraculous level of toughness to get through that. And the Chiefs ended up going and winning the Super Bowl, but they're not invincible. These men are not invincible. They're real people out there getting beat to crap. And, definitely a possibility that one of the Chiefs players could get injured. Knock on wood that it doesn't happen. but that could be something that derails them. 2 times, these teams going for a three-peat just ran into a team that was dynasty-esque or dynasty adjacent, however you want to say it. But, those Raiders teams that stopped the Dolphins or stopped the Steelers, they were pretty darn good. And you had that 49ers team that was pretty dang good that stopped the Cowboys. So, do I think there's a dynasty-esque team floating around out there to pick off the Chiefs? And I do not. And I talked about this last year quite a bit. If you go and you look at the quarterbacks that are playing in the NFL right now, Mahomes has more experience in the playoffs, more accolades, more everything than nearly all the other quarterbacks combined. So this is Mahomes' league to tear up at this point in time. And I don't see another team coming into the Chiefs, level of dynasty, level of play at any consistent way. So I don't think that this is going to be a situation where another dynasty-esque team comes up and dethrones the Chiefs. I just can't see that happening in 2024. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know down in the comments if you think I'm wrong, but I don't see that happening. Then you have one time where a quarterback retired. So John Elway retired, and that derailed their chance for a three-peat. But that's not going to happen to Patrick Mahomes. He's still very young, and he's not going to retire for quite some time. So of those different things that happened in the past, what do I think could realistically be the reasons for why the Chiefs don't three-peat? And they are the following. One is that the Chiefs could lose to some team on a fluke play or some any given Sunday situation, like an upset in the playoffs or an incredible play by another team. Just one of those things you can't see happen. The other thing that I think that could cause the Chiefs to derail this three-peat is if they had injuries to key players. So that would be your Travis Kelce, maybe one of their wide receivers, a starting offensive lineman, Patrick Mahomes. Just something like that happens every year in the NFL, and if the Chiefs get hit by the injury bug, that could derail them. And then maybe at the bottom, sort of, kind of a little bit, not a lot, the last thing that maybe could derail them is if some of their players just exit their prime, and maybe Travis Kelce is not what he used to be, but I don't think that's going to be the case. But that could be the third reason. So there's really the 3 things that I think that could derail the Chiefs' chance for a three-peat based on history, injuries and freak plays any given Sunday, and then also players just getting older and exiting their prime. So those are my 3 things that I think could happen based on history for why the Chiefs wouldn't three-peat. But now's your time to lend me your voice. Let me know down in the comments what you think the possibility could be for the Chiefs not three-peating. Do you disagree with me? Do you think there's like another dynasty-esque team floating out there in the water like sharks just waiting to strike? Let me know. But that's it for today's video. I had a really good time looking up all this historical information. I love the history of the NFL. So many men have passed through the league. So many great players, so many great coaches. It's fun to rehash some of the legends like we did in this video. But that's all I got. This is Gary signing out. Y'all have a good rest of your night. Take care. Have a good weekend.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.